Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I hope that you've enjoyed your Labor Day. I just want to remind you to follow me on all social media, The Carl Jackson Show. That's everywhere where you can find me on social media. Also, subscribe to the podcast, SalemPodcastNetwork.com. Scroll down. You can find me there, or go right to The Carl Jackson Show podcast. Or you can, or thecarljacksonshow.com, I should say, or anywhere where you find podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. And I just want to quickly remind you to please help out our sponsor, Mike Lindell and MyPillow, the people at MyPillow, great patriots. You can get the Percale and Giza Dream Sheets on sale right now, $29.98. All you have to do is use the promo code Carl, my name, CARL. Just go to mypillow.com, click on that radio listener square, and then that promo code applies to anything on the website. But right now they have the Percale and Giza Dream Sheets, on sale for $29.98. Also, you can give them a call if you prefer, 800-858-0263. 800-858-0263. These are patriots that are fighting for election integrity. Mike Lindell is. Please support them, and you'll support American jobs as well. All right, now I want to get to my guest because he blew up over the weekend, but honestly, in my opinion, for the right reasons. It's a message that resonated with me. It's a message that I want all of you to hear. My guest is Alma. Help me out, Ohene Opare. I told him
you got it right.
All right. Told him I wouldn't mispronounce his name. But anyway, he blew up on TikTok. He blew up on YouTube. And I'm glad that his video went viral, but I'm happier why it went viral, in my opinion. And this is what I want to speak to him about today, because he's a legal immigrant. Alma, tell me where you originally come from and how long you've been here in the United States.
So I'm originally from Ghana in West Africa, and I came to the United States for the first time in 2003, so in about May of 2003.
Okay. All right. You were 19 years old when you came to the United States of America. Did you come by yourself? Did you come with parents or family?
So I came by myself. I came initially, kind of funny thing, I came here as a missionary for my church.
Wow.
And so everything goes full circle, right?
Okay.
I was a Christian missionary, so I landed in Los Angeles, and my area of service was in the greater Los Angeles area. So that's how I got here.
Oh, my goodness. I currently live in Orlando, Florida, but I'm originally from Los Angeles. I had to escape Los Angeles, but I'm glad Jesus arrived with you. That's because they need some Jesus in Los Angeles. So God bless you, man. That is all right. So that's pretty cool. So you came as a missionary originally to the United States, and you wound up staying. Talk to us about that process really quick.
So my missionary experience lasted 2 years. And so after that service, I went back home. And I was home for about 6 weeks. In the interim, before I went home, I had applied to college to attend BYU. And so during my missionary period, I received admission into BYU. So I went home for about 6 weeks.
Okay.
And then came back to Los Angeles and then drove in a 1973 Volkswagen Beetle that was donated to me.
Hey, that's
and
a classic.
Drove from Los Angeles all the way to Utah for the very first time.
Wow. Okay. So BYU is Brigham Young University, right?
Yeah.
For those of you that might be tuning in. And again, his story is just fascinating to me because it always, listen, I used to be a liberal Democrat. I used to be, just kind of insane. I never voted Democrat, though. By the time God saved me, I literally started looking at the world through a different through a different lens, and I was looking forward to voting in the 2000 election with George W. Bush and Al Gore. I was going to vote for Al Gore. That was going to be my first vote, Alma. And then God radically saved me. I was living a life of sin like no one's business. God radically saved me. The transformation was so quick. And not only did it shock me, but it shocked everyone around me. And for some reason, God gave me a passion or America in politics that I'd never had before. So I'm always appreciative to hear stories like yours from someone that came to the United States as a legal immigrant and just appreciates the goodness of America. Now, you said something very interesting in your video. I'm not sure many people picked up on. Hopefully they did. This will be your first election cycle that you'll get to vote as a U.S. citizen. That is so cool. Tell me how that feels.
Well, it's amazing. For a very long time, I felt like an outsider, right? Because my voice could not be heard, and I felt like I depended on other patriots to go have my voice heard. And so things like when I hear about enthusiasm for the election being low, and people not going out, and you have primary elections where people are not showing up, and you have 30% turnout. I said, hey, you people need to go out to speak for us. We don't have a voice yet. And we're looking for you to go and represent the values that we believe in as immigrants. And so for me, getting to this point it's a journey that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. I was actually supposed to become a citizen in 2020, but because of COVID, everything was extended. So I ended up, getting my citizenship in 2021. But it basically allows me now, for the very first time at 38 years, to vote for the first time. And it's not just voting in America for the first time, but because I left Ghana at a time when I couldn't vote, there was no election that I could vote in. I have never voted in any election anywhere. And so this is my first opportunity to vote and to actually have my voice heard for the first time in a national election.
Oh, that is so cool. And you said this is okay. So this is really, really inspiring. You're really getting to me, Alma. Not only are you, you're already inspiring listening. I'm getting inspired listening to you because you just said that you would tell other patriots, hey, I'm not represented here. You have to go out and represent what I believe as an immigrant. I mean, that's just cool to me. Can you give us a sense of what it was like to live in Ghana, even though you didn't get an opportunity to vote there, compared to the United States? I understand my producer told me that you have a book that'll be coming out called American Privilege. That's what I was going to call this podcast, by the way. So I want to make sure I plug that for you. It's not out yet, but you can look for a book by Alma Ohene Opare called American Privilege. Give us that. Give us or express the difference, the difference between living in Ghana as an African and the American privilege, I guess you would say, that you experience coming to the United States, and why you don't take that for granted.
So the very first thing I'm going to say is this. When I posted this video, I reached out to my family. So I have family in Ghana. My dad is there, and my siblings. I have 3 sisters and a brother who are in Ghana right now. And so when I posted the video initially and it started to blow up, I immediately copied them and let them know that, hey, something's happening here. And one of the messages I got from my sister is, she literally said to me, if you were in Ghana, you would be hunted.
Whoa.
for speaking to the president of the country, in this way.
Right.
And I thought about it. My dad also reached out to me and said, I hope your message is not taken in a negative way. Wow. And so, Ghana has been, a democratic republic for a long time, since 1992. However, it is telling that people still feel like they can't speak out, and they can't speak out without potentially, whether real or imagined. Sure. They believe that voice could be stifled by the government, and that's sad for me. Growing up in Ghana, when I came here, a lot of people ask me, "What do you think is the difference between Ghana and America?" And for me, the difference was very clear. The difference is this fact: the fact that in America, I can do. In Ghana, I felt like I could wake up in the morning. I was a daydreamer, always thinking, what am I going to do next? And how is it going to happen? And I felt there were structural challenges to every goal that you set. And what I mean by that is, let's say I remember in high school, I wanted to build a pinhole camera. I saw it in an exercise book, a physics book, and I wanted to build it.
Wow.
And so I got some friends together and we started deciding how to build this thing. And the very first thing it asked for was this special film that we had to get. And I spent days just looking for the film and I couldn't find it. Eventually I found a substitute and I ended up working with my friends and we built up this pinhole camera and took some pictures. Now, the bottom line there is after we took those pictures, I could never find a place to develop those pictures. So I never found out whether it worked or not. And so I started to feel like, man, I feel so stifled. You can have ideas, you can have ambition. And this is not to say that people are not doing great things in Ghana. But for me personally, I felt like my dreams were bigger than the opportunities that were ahead of me. And so the difference for me is America, there is no limit to what I can dream, right? Dreaming is free. And I didn't have to censor myself in my thoughts as it related to what I could dream about. And I could say, hey, I want to be a billionaire. I could say that and not feel any sense of hesitation. Or I could say, I want to start a company that does this and not feel any sense of hesitation because the infrastructure is there, the knowledge is there, the people who can help you along the way is there, the funding is available. All those obstacles have been taken away for the most part. And because of that, I have freedom to dream and freedom to be able to wake up in the morning, come up with an idea, go to Home Depot, buy some parts, and by sundown have a prototype, right? That is American privilege. In Ghana, I could think a lot, and many times I would think, if only this were available.
Wow.
Then I could do this. If only someone could do, if only, this system existed, I could do this. If only the internet was faster, I could do this, and so on and so forth. There are all these structural obstacles, and I wanted to be in a place where my dreaming was not limited by the structural inadequacies of my society.
Okay, so that story brings up a couple of questions that pop up in my mind. One, were you around a lot of people in Ghana that felt that way about Ghana and America? Is that an overwhelming sentiment in Ghana, in your opinion? And then two, hearing what I just heard from you, what would you say to Black Americans that believe that they are victims here in the United States, despite the time and era that we live in?
So with respect to sentiments in Africa, one thing that you will realize when you go back to Ghana, every time I go back to Ghana, one of the things I deal with is you get there and you see things and you're like, ooh, that's a problem that someone should solve. This is an opportunity for someone to solve this problem. And then when you bring it up, this is very true. The most common phrase you would hear is, this is not America. This is Ghana. You can't think that you can do anything you want here. Like, this is Ghana. It's a very common phrase you would hear people say, even people in my family, and my family is very entrepreneurial, but they would say, hey, this is Ghana. Stop dreaming so highly. Right?
The cap on those dreams there, son.
Okay. Exactly. And that's very common to hear. And it's because, a lot of people have lived in that situation all their lives, and we haven't seen anything change for such a long time that you lose that, you get to a point where you have complete apathy towards, having any kind of significant fundamental changes in society. And because of that, it doesn't make any sense to dream too big, right? Because it's not going to happen. This is Ghana. And so that is the sentiment that I felt growing up. And that's the sentiment that I get when I get back there, because it looks like I'm always complaining about everything when I get there. So.
Wow. Okay. So about Blacks that complain about living in the United States of America, then your take.
See, for me, I can't speak directly to the experiences of people and what kind of structural challenges that they faced. I admit that, serving on my mission in Los Angeles,
yes,
one of the things I noticed there in the 2 years that I was there was I met a lot of people who were really good-hearted people.
Sure.
I met kids, and one experience I had that really touched me in Los Angeles was this idea that I met some kids, and we were talking, and in the course of the conversation, I discovered that they had never seen the beach. And I was in like the middle of South Central Los Angeles.
Right.
And I was like, how is this possible? Like the beach is, a few miles away.
Sure.
But these kids were basically kind of trapped in their little 4-block neighborhood in such a way that they had not seen the beach. And the question I ask is, how do you expect people to dream beyond those boundaries if they can't even, understand that those boundaries are just artificial? If they don't have any way to get out of those boundaries and begin to see. So one of the experiences that I have from Ghana is my parents are educators, so they started private schools. And one thing we always noticed is when we would take children from the village, from destitute conditions in the villages, and bring them into one of our schools and give them scholarships, everything changed.
Right.
You would come back in a year and their ambitions changed.
Sure.
Their ideas changed. Their dreams of what they could be changes.
Right.
And so for me, I don't know exactly, what people are going through and what makes them believe that opportunities don't exist. But I believe that what we need to do is to help people recognize their potential. I think the worst thing you can do to a person is to hide their potential from them. And when you don't recognize the value of that potential and what's inside you, your vision of the world is completely different. And so my goal here is to begin to break down those walls and to help people see that you have something to contribute to society. You have worth that is not granted to you by the government, right? You are someone who has the potential to put good into the world and not be relegated to the conditions of your birth.
Man.
And my message is to begin to break down those walls and to get people out, looking outside where they were born, and to begin to embrace ideas and philosophies that transcend their current estate.
Sure.
Exactly.
That's good. I mean, that's good stuff. I can tell you, Alma, speaking from a perspective where I was probably one of those kids, except that I did have a father that would at least take us to the beach once a year. It's something that we did where we would go and ride bikes, maybe twice a year even, where we lived in, ironically, South Central, for those of you that don't know, isn't the most pleasant place to live in. And in Los Angeles, my grandmother lived there. We were there weekly. I was born in Compton, California, lived in Long Beach and Linwood for a good portion of my years growing up there. So I could tell you, growing up in the areas that I grew up in, that it's amazing to hear you say this, because it literally took me back to my childhood where I did believe all of these things. There were certain things you couldn't accomplish because you were Black, because you were poor. And you don't have to speak to this, but I am telling you what popped up in my mind when you were talking about this. And it was, as you said, honestly, they were artificial boundaries where I was taught, based upon where I grew up and the school system that I grew up in, we were educated to some degree, but I was also taught that I was a victim in some circumstances, and not always explicitly, but oftentimes implied. But at least I was taught that if you worked hard, if you could dream in the United States, you could become something. But there was always this kind of implied thought that, you have to be a little careful. You're Black. Don't you know what I mean? It was weird. And then I would see Asians come into our quote unquote our community, and they would open up stores and stuff like that. And I had the mentality, Alma, like, what are these people doing? Buying up property and stuff on our turf, in our territory. That was the mindset that I grew up with. And then later, obviously, I'm like, oh my God, these are people that came from another country that realized their American dream while I'm sitting here saying it's not available to me. So I do feel like, and this is just my opinion, that a lot of those boundaries, or a lot of the boundaries that exist within the United States, are self-imposed, because I do believe they are artificial a lot of times. But you have a whole structure, I would say, a political system. I would say, I don't want you to go there. You don't need to go there. But I would say a party that exists that makes sure some of those boundaries, albeit, real or perceived, stay in place so they can keep their political power. But that's just me. That's just me speaking. So I do want to ask you about this. It took 18 years to become a citizen in the United States. I wish 1 million more of you would come to the United States. Talk to us about our legal immigration process.
So I think a lot of Americans don't have to deal with the immigration system. And so because of that, I get that people don't understand, how it works and why it takes so long. And there are processes that are involved there that a lot of people don't know. So when you are coming to America, it is not, at least coming from a third world country like Ghana, it is not a guarantee that you would, get a visa. There's no guarantees. And so when you go to the visa interview, it's literally, people fast and pray, get their life savings and go to that visa interview, and you have 90 seconds to say what they need to hear.
Wow.
For you to get that visa. And in some cases, around the time when I was coming, if you don't get the visa, they would put a stamp of denial in your passport. And once you have that stamp of denial, you will most certainly not get a visa to any other, country in the West. Because once they see you've been denied by America, it becomes a black, mark on your record. And so people would actually, after they got denied, they would lose their passports and have to create a new passport so that they could. So it's not a guarantee that if you applied, you would get in. So just getting that visa is a huge, accomplishment. But I don't know if I should call it an accomplishment because it's kind of arbitrary. Because, I know people who probably had better qualifications than I did who did not get a visa because they couldn't prove something and so it's a very nebulous process. But once you get into the country, there are different types of visas. You have immigrant visas, meaning visas that have an intention for you to stay. And then you have non-immigrant visas, which are visas that say that you have to return after your visa expires.
So I'm assuming you got the immigrant visa then.
No, initially I came in as a non-immigrant. So
Okay.
all people who come in, whether in my case as a religious worker and then later on as a student, all those visas are non-immigrant, which means there's no path to citizenship at all for those visas. And so in order to get on a path to citizenship, you have to switch over to a visa that has immigrant intentions. And for many of us who go to school here, the very first opportunity to do that is to graduate from college and get an H1 visa, H1B visa, which is a visa for skilled workers.
Right.
And that visa has a dual intent, which means you no longer have to prove that you will leave the country. You now are stating that you have an intent to immigrate to the United States. So once you get that H1B, and to get that, you have to find an employer that is willing to sponsor that, and there are legal fees associated with that. And so usually only very large employers that have a legal immigration team usually will sponsor an H1 visa. Otherwise, you're kind of on your own. And case in point, my brother graduated from college and he returned home because there were no prospects for him getting a company to sponsor him.
Wow.
And so he returned home last year. So once you've gone through that process, eventually you find an employer. I was lucky. I was recruited by Microsoft right out of college. And so I went to Washington State to work for Microsoft. And so they did the H-1B for me, and that put me on that path.
Okay.
But once you start on that path, you have 6 years on that visa. And during those 6 years, you hope that your employer will choose to apply for a green card for you. So if you're lucky, within those 6 years, your employer starts that process. And I was lucky. It wasn't Microsoft that did it. A second employer that I went to started that process for me. And that happened in 2013. So by then I'd already been in the country, for 10 years, right? And so then they start that process. That process itself takes about 2 years, depending on what country you're coming from. So if you're coming from, Ghana, it took about 2 years. If you're coming from India, it may take 10 years. And so once you've gone through that process, you get your green card. And then once you get your green card, then it takes 5 years for you to apply for citizenship.
Wow.
And so that is the process.
Wow.
That finally got me to 2020 is when I was supposed to finally hit that 5-year mark and apply for citizenship. And then 2021, I eventually got it after the delay of COVID. So that's the process that I went through. So really, I would say the path to citizenship process started in 2013, because that's when I had someone actually apply for a green card for me. And then that puts you on the path, and that took 7 years to get to. So,
wow, that's I think more evidence that big government stinks. Let me ask you this, and I say this somewhat facetiously, or ask this somewhat facetiously, but at the same time, I'm sitting here thinking, maybe it would have been beneficial to just come through the southern border.
I think I can predict what you're going to say.
No, and obviously I don't want that, but I do want to get your take. It's insane considering what you've gone through. Your brother wasn't as lucky as you just mentioned. And then you see people that are bombarding the United States, and forgive me, invading, in my opinion, because they know that they can get in illegally and they don't even want to bother with the process. And then we have good guys like you that are obeying the laws of the land, people that we definitely want to make sure become American citizens. And I mean, how do you feel about that? How do you reconcile that?
So I'll say two things. One, the fact that people are bombarding the border is a positive thing. And the reason I say that is, for all those people who say this place is, inequitable and people are oppressed and people are being put upon by the system and so on and so forth, we have daily evidence that there are people who would go through hoops and jump through the desert and do all sorts of things and put their lives in danger, sell their freedom to cartels and so on just to get here. So that tells you, that debunks this idea that America is not the greatest country on earth, right? People are wanting to come here from all over the world. So when I see that, for me, I think Americans can look at it in one of two ways. And I choose to look at it from the perspective of, hey, we're still hot as a country. People want to come here, right? And so that's interesting. So that debunks all the people who, when someone wins that they don't like, they say they want to leave the country. It debunks all that. And so that's a good thing that people still want to come here. However, for people like me who have gone through that legal process, the thing that broke my heart a lot is the fact that I would wake up every day just praying in my prayers, literally saying, God, open a way for some employer to see my value and just choose to sponsor me for a green card. And I prayed that prayer many, many, many times, just hoping for that opportunity. And what broke my heart is that every time they speak about immigration and amnesty and everything, not enough attention is paid to the people who are here, who are paying taxes, who are buying homes, who are contributing to society, and they're not spoken about. And if they're ever spoken about, it's as an afterthought, right? And every focus is put on legalizing the people who broke the laws to get here, and not thinking that, hey, I'm here, but I'm not free, in the sense that for instance, as someone who was even, when I was waiting for my green card, one of the restrictions that I had as an H-1B holder is I am required to work in the industry with which I got that visa. And so if I wanted to change jobs, in some cases, if I wanted to be promoted and my new job was materially different from the job under which I got that approval, I had to restart the entire process all over again. And so people would refuse promotions, refuse, different things. And at the same time, my wife was, well educated. She has a degree in psychology, but she was not allowed to work at all. She could not work completely. There was no availability for her to work. And so while I was going through college, even though my wife had a college degree, she was barred from working. And so I was a poor college student.
Wow.
Because I could only work 20 hours while I was going to school. And so the legal process has all these restrictions that if you don't obey would jeopardize your ability to eventually become a citizen. And so we follow those rules with, strictness. And I always felt like, when I was on H-1B, I could wake up one day and if I lost my job for any reason, the employer was required to give me, with my last paycheck, a plane ticket, a one-way plane ticket back to my country. And so that fear is always there. So you don't want to be, in a place where it just changes how you behave because you don't want to jeopardize anything. You don't speak up, too harshly. You just are protecting your life that you created here until you finally get that green card and you finally get the freedom to do something else, to change your mind, to go test something else, to go be an entrepreneur. When I was in college, I wanted to be an entrepreneur so badly, but the process would not let me. I couldn't work for myself. I had to be sponsored by somebody. And so even though I had ideas that I wanted to bring forth, I would start a company, but I couldn't work for the company, right? Because I wasn't allowed to. And so I would find people and I would say, hey, I have this great idea. I want to pursue it, but I can't be on any of the papers. Like I can't. So I would just, outsource this idea to you and have you kind of take it. But because it was my idea, exactly. But also because it was my idea, the passion came from me. And so if I am not there, it's impossible to kind of push it. And so I started various, ideas and ventures that I couldn't take forward because I got to the point where I couldn't do it because I was not allowed by the immigration system. And so because of that, I'm imagining the tens of thousands of immigrants, legal immigrants who are currently under those restrictions, who have ideas they could contribute to the country, but they can't. And the funny thing, guess what? If you have $1 million, you can sponsor yourself for a green card.
I got to tell you this, Alma.
If you have $1 million.
That as you progress and as you become even more successful in the United States, and you obviously are going to be, you already are, but I hope that you will consider taking up the cause. I'm learning. I'm learning from you today. I love learning. I'm learning from you today. I hope that you will be when I go on, when I'm back on radio, I'm going to have you on my radio program as well. I want you. I have a co-host that's an African American, and he happens to be white. I always say jokingly, he's the only African American I know that happens to be white. But now I know a black one. So I would love to have you on, but also I hope that in the future. This is just me. I don't know what God has exactly called you to do. Actually, you've given us some ideas in speaking with you. But this legal immigration system obviously needs to be streamlined, and someone needs to think through it that isn't a government official that can provide some ideas to people that really want to streamline people like yourself. So just food for thought. I want to get on to some of the issues in the video. We'll close it up with some of these thoughts. You talked about being a MAGA Republican. Before I get to that, you have a wife, you have 4 children, as you mentioned in the video. I'm guessing that you're not teaching your children to be victims in the United States of
Yep.
America.
Yeah,
I can tell.
I don't suffer mediocrity.
Good for you. Good for your children, frankly, and good for the United States of America. God bless you. I love that line. I think I'm gonna steal that. I don't suffer me. I love that. You know, I don't know if I told you this, Alma. I did. I think actually, you're gonna be coming out with a book entitled "American Privilege." That's what I was gonna name this podcast. So I think I mentioned that already, but it's just fascinating to me. All right, now let's get on to this. You are a MAGA conservative Republican. You introduced a litany of things that provided that evidence, if you will. And so, why don't we just go over some of these things? You say you're proud to be an American, and you were kind of upset by Joe Biden, the leader of the free world, that would label. I love the way you frame this. His fellow countrymen as terrorists, extremists. They're full of hate, or we are full of hate, dangerous, a threat to democracy. Talk to us about that real quick. What does it mean? You look at Joe Biden in that satanic background that he had. I mean, honestly, I should get credit. I said it before Monica Crawley, and she got all the credit. I love Monica Crawley, but come on, guys. But anyway, but having said that, just talk to us about that. You're watching that speech. You're listening to this guy. The way that you framed it, the leader of the free world, label his countrymen all of these things: extremists, terrorists, full of hate, dangerous, threat to democracy. What was going through your mind when you heard this?
So I was horrified. When I heard the words coming out of the president. However, I saw something that I think is now what they're using as the walk back, which is, and this is part of the comments I've received from my video, which is that he wasn't speaking about you in particular, or he wasn't speaking about all Republicans, and not all Republicans are MAGA Republicans. He's only speaking about this small group of fringe people. And my response to that is, if it's indeed a small group of fringe people on the Republican side,
wow, good question.
Does it require a national speech about the soul of the nation, right? And so if you're saying that, and then the other part to that is, he's,
right.
He wasn't speaking off the cuff. This was a teleprompter speech. And what that means is that somebody put those lines in there. And that person knows what MAGA stands for and understood that there are millions of people who bought MAGA hats. There are millions of people who bought the t-shirts and stickers and so on and so forth. All these millions of people across the country embrace that term, because that term is exactly as it is, the most unifying term that you can come up with for any country. And you can see that same term has been transformed to represent so many other things because it just makes sense. And so to take that unifying term and to decide that we are going to turn it into a pejorative, and then to label people who you describe as potential enemies of the states as MAGA Republicans, you can't turn around then and say, oh, I was just separating, two groups of people. Sure. You could have said extreme Republicans. You could have said, Republicans on the fringe end. You could have said, anything, but you took that unifying term and tried to turn it into a pejorative, right? And so I was horrified when I heard him say that. And for me, it gave me pause. And like I said, I think about the children. So if I have a MAGA t-shirt or I have a MAGA hat in my closet, and my son hears this message, my son is 15, and he hears this message that, the president says, MAGA Republicans are a threat to our nation. And then I see my dad's hat.
Wow.
What is the president doing?
Right.
To those children who see their grandparents wearing that hat or wearing that t-shirt, or who have a picture of their grandparent at a Trump rally wearing a Make America Great Again hat. And they see that through their family photos. What did the president just do to that child? What did he plant into their head? And that is where my concern came from, is that the president has a bully pulpit, and he has the ability to heal the country, and that's what he said he was going to do, right? So I'm just holding him up to his own standards, or I would say perceived or feigned standards, because now I don't know if the goal is to unite the country, because these kinds of terminology and characterizations are nothing but unifying.
Disunifying.
Right? Are nothing, are furthest from everything, I would say, everything but unifying. And so for me, I thought it was a sad day in American history. It was a sad day in American history to hear that from the president of our country. And once again, I said, I don't have any hate or malice towards anyone. And I believe tens of millions of people who embrace the term MAGA did not do so because they had hate for anyone. Many of these people felt disenfranchised. Many of these people felt apathy because they had been, ignored and not listened to for many years and generations. And they've had leaders who have said the right things, but when they get in power, they don't do the things they promised to do. And so, I was probably like most people who wondered whether Trump would keep his promises. Now we look at Trump and we understand, that he is not a perfect person, right? He has flaws, and sometimes we are concerned about those. However, he found a message that struck a chord, right? It struck a chord emotionally with millions of people, and that message said to them, hey, you can play a part in making this country better again. You can play a part. You have a part to play. And that rallying cry was something that energized people and gave them a desire to get out there and to speak up for the first time and to stand up for what they believed in and to believe that they could make a difference. That was the rallying cry. And it was not built out of hate. It was not built out of, some weird fringe idea that, the country is changing and we're afraid of that, or whatever that, excuse, people bring up. It was built around that uniting quality of Americans. I've always believed that America is great because Americans are good. And what I'm hoping our leaders would do is to inspire that goodness in Americans and get them off their butts and get them working in the world to kind of create the goodness that we want to see.
That's so good, and hopefully,
and that's exactly how I felt.
No matter what party, that'll just stop denigrating the United States, where people can understand, like you do. This is an exceptional nation. This is a great nation. I don't understand why anyone would, unless you twist the truth, why anyone would be upset that someone gets in office and wants to provide more American jobs and wants a strong military and wants our country and the people within our country to do well. And one of the things I was very skeptical about Donald Trump, I was like, dude, I even told some of my friends, I had a big argument with a friend of mine on radio. I'm like, man, are you crazy? Ted Cruz is the guy, but we were going back and forth, but he was right. And I just paid attention to what Donald Trump did. I was like, okay, I'm just going to see what this guy does. And this isn't sexy, Alma, but one of the first things that he did, and a lot of people, I'm a political nerd, so I'll admit it. I don't mind. One of the things that he started doing that I paid attention to within his first 100 days was deregulation. It was things that people don't talk about a lot on TV. It'll never make for an interesting topic on radio necessarily, or TV, maybe more so radio, but definitely not television because the time is so short. But I paid attention to that, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, this guy's the real deal. This guy is the real deal. You're not a dictator when you deregulate and argue to cut taxes and argue for the Second Amendment. Dictators don't do that. When you return power to the people, it's amazing. It's almost as if Americans were like, this is insane. This guy is evil. He's actually empowering us. I'm like, you guys are nuts.
We live in a bizarre world where good is bad and bad is good. And when you say America first, it's supposed to be a racist dog whistle. I don't know. And the question I have is, why is it that some people are so attuned to dog whistles? I don't think a lot of people, MAGA Republicans, as I call them, I don't think they are, hearing America first and thinking, oh, there has to be some hidden meaning to this. And other than thinking, yes, we pay taxes, our president and our country and our leaders should focus on us and our needs first before we focus on other places. And, I come from a country that needs a lot of help, right? However, I still understand that, Americans need to help Americans first. One of the culture shocks that I had when I came to Los Angeles for the first time is because I had this kind of romantic idea of America. And, so what you saw in the movies, you saw in the films. And so as I was being taken from LAX down into the city that I was going to start in, I'm looking around and I'm seeing things, I'm seeing, trash on the side of the street. I'm seeing, maybe a homeless person or two and things like that. And that was my culture shock, because I was thinking, well, this is America, right? This shouldn't be here, right? And, this is the America I imagine. And then as I started going door to door and going into people's homes and talking to people, and I realized that, this place has the same kind of challenges anybody else in the world has. And the government's first responsibility is to take care of the challenges of the people who they are supposed to represent. Government did not precede the people. The people established government to ensure that their rights were protected. And so how is it that that government then gets enough power to the point of ignoring the will of the people, right? And my hope is that we can refocus our attention rather than, going, guns blazing into kind of the kind of rhetoric that, sound good, but don't actually move the needle on anything. My philosophy is that I am looking at anybody who doesn't agree with me as a potential convert, right? And so as a missionary, as I would go from door to door, most of the people I met would, slam the door. They would not listen. They were not interested. But I had a responsibility to treat them with respect, because they say it takes about 7 interactions with somebody before people begin to open up to the ideas they're sharing. And so if I come to you and I am mean to you and I represent a certain value, right? I think the tragedy is that even if you come to embrace my values, you still have a hard time actually putting that thumb and voting for that position. I've heard people say, I'm disillusioned by the Democrats, but I can't see myself vote Republican. And I say, why? What brand have we created that makes that difficult for people, right? And that our goal is to make it very easy for people who are inclined to hear our message to recognize that they can associate with us, that we will embrace them, that we will love them, that we will share our love with them. And that means that we need to be circumspect in the way we speak, and we should speak clearly and boldly. And that speech should not come from a place of malice. It should come from a place of love. Because in the end, when there's good policy, right, it leads to love and unity. It leads to, people helping each other. So that's exactly what I want to do. And so my handle on TikTok is willful positivity. I actually trademarked that term, willful positivity, because you wake up every day and you're not always going to feel positive. But willful positivity is making it a point to turn that day into a positive by, inventing in your own mind a new way to look at a certain situation with a positive outlook. That is willful. It doesn't come naturally. You have to willfully, seek to be positive, which means that if I see somebody who today doesn't believe in what I'm doing or disagrees with me, I'm going to say, have a great day. Like, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Because maybe today is not their day of conversion.
I'm not going to go out and buy grenades
year.
today here, Alma. You have just talked me out of it. I really do. That was good, man. That was really good. Listen, let's close out here. But I want you, if you would, make sure first off, before you get out, tell people all the places where they can find you. And here I am too, offering just some more advice. I want you to get involved in the legal immigration fight some way, somehow. That's just me. But I also, something you said during this interview that really struck another chord with me, perhaps could be your second book, and that is You Don't Suffer Mediocrity. That really struck a chord with me. Perhaps that's something you can develop. I think more American families, American parents, and American children as well need to hear messages like that. And I don't want to. You brought it up here. I don't want to take that thought, but I just something I feel impressed in my spirit to share with you. So perhaps that's something something for you to run with. I don't know. If you don't run with it, I'll steal it. But I think, it's good. But just close us out. Tell everyone where they can find you online, what they have to look forward to from you, and also just quickly tell us what it means from your perspective to be a MAGA Republican.
All right. So you can find me on TikTok at Willful Positivity. However, I know a lot of people are not on TikTok. And so I am also on Instagram, same handle at Willful Positivity. And then also on Twitter, you can find me by my full name. My handle is basically my full name without the dash. So it's Alma Ohene Opare on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook under Willful Positivity, and then also under my name. So if you search for my name, you will find me. Just put my name in Google, you will find me. And so that's how you find me. And then also with respect to my upcoming book, I don't have a publisher right now. And so I'm trying to do this by myself. Once again, this is the American spirit, right? You see a problem and you just decide that you can be the solution. And so I am right now trying to, I created a campaign on Indiegogo, just trying to see if there is a demand for it so that I can know exactly, what to do in terms of production and so on. And so if you go to AmericanPrivilegeBook.com, it will direct you right to that Indiegogo campaign. And if we can get people to support that, at least it will help me understand the demand. So it will help me gauge how quickly we need to get this out. And so any support there will be very helpful. And then with respect to my understanding of, being a MAGA Republican, I say to myself, what does MAGA stand for? It is Making America Great Again. And why is there the word again there, right? Why is that there? It means that we have drifted from some of the values that made us great in the first place, that made people like me wake up in the morning and daydream of wanting to come to America. And some of the things we have drifted away from is this idea that everybody has a right, an equal right to the public square, that we can speak our minds, and as long as we do it in a respectful manner, that we have a right to be there. And this idea that I can't suffer someone who is saying something I don't agree with, and so we should, remove them from the public square and not allow them to speak their minds.
Right.
That is not an American idea. That is a borrowed idea. And so there's a reason freedom of speech is in the First Amendment, because it is the basis of every other right that we have. Because in order for me to change anything in the world, it starts with me speaking about the world. And if I can't do that, then what exactly can I accomplish in this world? So that's the first part. Freedom of speech needs to return, and people need to feel safe enough to speak out and not fear that they would lose their jobs or lose their livelihoods because they speak. But I believe also in the responsibility to speak in a way that communicates, that just allows people to understand what you're saying.
Good.
And speak in a way that doesn't allow your words to be misconstrued. And so that's important as well. And then being a MAGA Republican for me is returning to an understanding that the government works for the people and not the other way around. It is understanding that the government needs to be limited to its constitutional prerogatives, that the government cannot solve everything, right? And that there will be problems in the world until Jesus comes back, right? We can't create a perfect society, and it is a dangerous attempt. If anybody decides that they can create a perfect society, that is a very dangerous thing to do, because you can't do that and maintain freedom. It's just impossible. And so we need to understand that we need to have the government be limited to the few things that are important to our security and our safety and the protection and defense of our rights. And then we need to allow people to teach people the correct principles and let them govern themselves, right? We need to believe that people can govern themselves and can make decisions that are beneficial to their own interests. And we need to trust the American people to do that. And I'm MAGA Republican because I believe that it embodies a love for the country, which is necessary for our country to thrive. If you fundamentally hate something, it's impossible to work hard to uphold it. And so we have to change that mindset. We have to understand that, yes, we do have a history, and we don't whitewash that history. But we look in the face of that history and we turn our backs and say, we will go a different direction. Right? We will go a different direction. And the way we do that is to empower the people to make the changes in their hearts and in their minds and in their homes and in their schools and their local communities. That is where we need to return to, and not expect some overarching, bureaucracy to come and save us. And so being a MAGA Republican is returning to those principles and returning to those values, faith, hope, charity, returning to those foundational principles that allow us the headspace to begin to solve the problems in front of us. Every time I go online, I hear people say things like, well, there's this problem and there's that problem in that community. I'm like, why is anybody not solving that problem? Why is nobody solving the problem? And many times it's because there are structural challenges to solving those problems, because there are people who benefit from having these structures persist. And hopefully we can inspire enough people to wake up and say, I can be a solution to the problem I see in the world. That is what I am hoping this idea of being returning America and making America great again becomes. That is where I wanted to go. Trump started, made that phrase popular, but I think it goes beyond Trump. And I think it should be a unifying and rallying cry for every American. And I hope that one day we can get to a point where even the Democrats.
So well said. And I got to be honest with you. I think we are going to get to that point. I think we're going through tumultuous times right now, and we will continue to do so for a short period of time. But I think in the end, I think in the end, I should say, I hate to sound so corny and like a cliche, but I feel like we win. And I feel like we win because I think all Americans will win if we do make America, great again. And I just some of the reasons that you mentioned, obviously the First Amendment, free speech, freedom of religion, the rule of law, the ability for anyone to come to America and to be able to dream and to be able to pursue their dreams and solutions to problems. You don't have to be a victim in the United States of America, and some of the artificial boundaries that do exist, we want to bust those up so that people, regardless of family structure or economic their economic plight or whatever it may be, can find hope in American greatness and the opportunities that do lie ahead in America. Man, I got to tell you, Alma, it has been, I was looking forward to this interview, but beyond beyond your smarts, you're obviously a very intelligent guy. Your how do I say this? Your love for America just exudes, and you're just a good, decent man. And I got to tell you, I really loved speaking with you today, and I hope
Thank you
that
so much.
if my producer has your contact information, please be sure to leave him your number if he doesn't, and I'll have him give you mine. I want to stay in contact with you. Oftentimes I'll fill in for some of the national hosts with Salem Media, and I want to make sure that I have you on. I want more people to get to know your story, but also I think the story of the legal immigrant that needs to be. We need to talk about it more. It is true. We talk about the illegal immigration because it's obviously a nuisance,
Mhm.
but we need to talk about the people that illegal immigration is impacting, from American citizens that have been here already, obviously, but also people with your perspective. We'll also be sure, for those of you tuning in, we'll also be sure to include the link of the video that went viral and is probably still going viral. I'm sure more people are checking it out. So we'll make sure that we include the link in the description, and be sure, please, to subscribe to the Carl Jackson podcast. Just go to thecarljacksonshow.com. You can go to Salem Podcast Network. .com, or anywhere where podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. We really do want to build up those channels, YouTube and Rumble. So if you'd like to see, Alma is a very handsome guy. So if you'd like to see Alma instead of just listen to Alma, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Carl Jackson Show, and our Rumble channel, The Carl Jackson Show. And also all things social media, The Carl Jackson Show. That is Getter, that is Twitter, that is True Social, that is Facebook, you name it. The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. And again, support our friends at mypillow.com, Mike Lindell at mypillow.com, a warrior, and he's giving people a good night's rest. I'm sure Alma is going to go to mypillow.com and use that. All right. Well, Alma, you got to make sure you use that promo code Carl the next time you go there.
I do.
So get those Percale and Giza Dream Sheets on sale now, $29.98. So guys, I appreciate you listening to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. It's been such a pleasure to speak with Alma Ohene Opare. You spell his name AlmaOhene Opare. Find him on social media as well. This is a guy worth following. I don't always recommend that. This is a guy that is worth following. And until next time, guys, don't grow weary doing good.